Welcome to another episode of Twig and Jenkins. Brad is making me do the intro despite my expressed wishes that he always do the intro. But fine. We are here today. See, this is why I don't like doing it. Because then I get lost.
Nailed it.
All right, you finish.
You
Introduce
nailed it. Minnie is, look, everyone knows Minnie in this town. Minnie, I think, might be, we just talked about what fruit represents our hearts, and we both picked the kiwi. But I would go beyond the fact that we share similar summer fruits. Minnie is the rare person in this town who everyone loves, which is rare. Let's just be real. In DC, very tough to accomplish. But then also simultaneously, everyone respects. Very tough thing to get the Venn diagram right. You have it. President, CEO. What is the exact title of Reproductive Freedom for All?
President and CEO.
President
Reproductive
CEO.
Freedom for All. Yeah.
Formerly known as NARAL.
Yes.
Incredible rebrand, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of organizations that have had that long of a history to rebrand.
55 years.
But I feel like people like my daughter who's in the audience who just did a project, she was so excited to tell us about Reproductive Freedom for All. So very well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. And that's a good, intro to what we are, because what we decided was post the Dobbs decision, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit more, we needed a brand that wasn't about being DC insiders or that political, grass tops understood. We needed a brand that the average American who was tuning into this crisis for the first time was going to resonate with, because we really needed to be about talking to as many Americans as possible and not about an inside game.
Yeah.
And that was a significant, I won't say it was a shift. It was going back to our roots of who we were in the very beginning, which is a grassroots organizing entity.
And there are just too many things in DC with acronyms. Let's be real.
I think there's that. That is
People are
that is also in
trying
the
to make
pro
us an acronym.
column.
Yes.
That is definitely in the pro column. But I also think that it does also represent, intentionally or not, a sort of cultural shift in DC has such a sort of, what's that like such a force towards being insular and like being beltway and
button navel gazing.
Right. Like, and you don't even, it's not like anyone
Belly button,
expresses that as a thing, but you really get pushed in that direction. And so I think even being open to rebranding, which is also not something that this town loves to do, but then B, doing so in order to be an expansive version of yourself that looks well beyond the contours of this city and sort of the power brokers in the city is really important.
It's a great point. Yeah.
We had a lot of people say, you're crazy, don't do this.
Yes, right?
I will say my predecessor, Elise Hogue, who a lot of people know, who's just a really brilliant strategist, started the ball rolling after Trump's election. Like, we've got to rethink everything.
Great.
So rebranding was on the table.
16 or 20?
In 16.
16.
So rebranding was on the table when I took the job, but it just it takes a lot of effort to actually pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And you have to have the right moment, and I think Dobbs was sort of that wake up call. And it was the thing that pushed us from like, let's think about it and research it. Let's poll it. Let's test it, to let's actually do it. And when we did the research, we found, oh my gosh, this brand is so resonant. But I will say it goes back to something Elise and the team did post-Trump, post-Hillary 2016, which was, how do we better talk about this issue to voters? So it wasn't just a rebrand.
Yeah.
Changing from pro-choice to reproductive freedom was by design as a message that would resonate with more Americans, because we're shifting from this choice life binary where we were losing, right?
Yeah.
To
Across issues.
Agreed.
And choice meaning less and less, because for so many women of color and women in places like Texas, my home state, they didn't have a choice anymore. Even before Dobbs, they didn't have a choice. And then to freedom, which we frame as the freedom to decide if, when, and how to have a family.
Yeah.
That resonates with so many more people. It takes it away from gender.
Yes.
It makes it about family and community. Everyone can relate to that freedom to decide. So that was the impetus. That was the testing before. That was, campaigns were run on that message. So that was all happening before we changed the name.
What you're saying, Minnie, is you came up with the name. Beyonce immediately made a song called Freedom.
100%.
Then Kamala jumped on board with that. That was the whole brand of the campaign. And, you know, if only they put more branding in your lap, maybe we would have gotten across the finish line. Is what we're saying.
That's unofficially the narrative.
Right.
Totally
that's what everyone's saying.
Yeah, that's what everyone's saying.
But I will say that even in the short time since that rebrand, it's worked.
Yeah.
Right? The
Agreed.
way that you interact with questions about reproductive choice and freedom and family making and family building has become so much more expansive over the course of 2 years. And it is like a real testament to sort of the magic of a narrative structure that I don't know that we give enough credit to in this town. And as we think about organizing, right, it's just like you have to build the right container so that people will walk into it and like so people will come towards you when you're trying to organize, as opposed to like us constantly chasing them to get them to believe in what we're trying to say.
I think that's right. And another way that I'd phrase it is rebranding for rebranding's sake doesn't work.
Yep.
Right.
It's got to be rooted in something real. So in our case, it was we've got to reach folks who are with us, but don't know that they're with us yet. And that was pre-Dobbs, right? And that was so first it was a communications challenge. Then it became an organizing challenge. When folks woke up and said, Roe v. Wade's not law of the land anymore. I don't have these rights anymore. Where do I go? Who do I find? Where's my political home? We needed to present them with something that they would automatically get. If I'm knocking on a door.
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm with NARAL, Pro-Choice America. What's that? You know, unless you're a DC insider or you're a Sacramento insider, you know, one of the state capitals, you're in an inside bubble, you wouldn't know who we were. But if my organizer goes to a door in Arizona and knocks on a door and says, I'm here with Reproductive Freedom for All, and I want to talk to you about this ballot measure or Ruben Gallego or Kamala Harris, it's in the name. The mission is in the name. That is a huge organizing advantage. So I think when organizations and entities look at branding as a purely PR exercise, there's no mechanism to actually realize the value of the brand.
Yeah.
And I think business understands that.
Yep.
Brands are generally integrated with a product, but we don't do that very well, I think, in politics. We try to shift the idea of something without actually taking an action to change it.
Right.
Right?
It's a really important part of it.
I mean, it sounds silly.
But it has to be said because we don't do it.
And I'm not saying I magically woke up and was like, this is how we're going to do it. It was by necessity.
Yeah.
But in analysis, like when we went back and said, well, why did it work so well? And our metrics were, did we lose members? We actually grew membership.
I was going to say,
which is crazy.
Yeah.
We were like, oh, we're going to definitely take a dip in folks who are going to open our emails because like, who the hell is this?
Yeah.
We had better rates.
Yeah.
So all of the data and metrics improved. Well, we didn't know that was going to be the case.
Yeah.
And so when we went back and did the analysis, we were like, oh, it's connected to the action.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So exciting. How are you doing, Minnie? We've not caught up in a while.
I know.
I've been doing this with friends who I've not seen in a while. Like, how's your mental health? How are you dealing with, fascist fever dream, late stage capitalism?
A lot of crazy attacks on reproductive
A lot
rights.
of attacks on you and your organization. Like, how are you holding up over there?
So this is an important part of my journey, so I will say it. I am officially in menopause.
Mm-hmm.
This is really important.
Yeah, let's go.
And the metric is 1 year without a period.
Mm-hmm.
I am there. I am in it. So this is connected to my well-being because I've been on a journey.
Yeah.
I think that more and more we're seeing women of my generation, Gen X, talking about menopause, talking about mental health and wellness, and it's so connected. So, for the past couple of years, I've been on hormone replacement therapy, which has been life-changing. I have an excellent therapist. I take anti-anxiety meds.
Yeah.
I am working on with a nutritionist, with a coach, with a trainer. I've started weightlifting.
Yeah.
Because you
let's
have
go.
to.
Yeah.
Osteoporosis and menopause and all the things. that's going to be my next career after this, is going to be a menopause wellness influencer. So let's talk about that. I'm speaking it into existence on
do it.
Twigs and Jenkins.
Do it.
Let's make it happen. But I say all that to say, like, this is all stuff nobody talked to us about as women. So I always joke, I'm leading this organization, but I'm actually at the end of my reproductive journey, not the beginning. And it's young people in the beginning of the journey who really need to take over the movement, right?
Yeah,
so
interesting.
I'll be calling Sadie in a couple of years to take over. But back to, my core mental health, I'm doing all the things.
Yeah.
I'm a sandwich generation person. I have a mom who's having healthcare challenges. I have small kids. I just think it's all doable, but you need all the help.
Yeah.
So I'm okay. I'm maybe even thriving in certain parts of my life, but it's because I have all this assistance. I have 2 nannies. I get paid relatively well in our movement, in our industry. Those things matter. So I don't want to be out there saying, I'm great. It's kind of bullshit for younger folks and other folks in our movements, in the progressive space, to bullshit about it. Like, I'm good, but I'm privileged. I have a great board of directors. I have resources. I have a supportive family.
Yeah.
Otherwise I would not be great, because this is a shitty time to be doing what we do. And this is a really challenging part of life, being in the sandwich generation and menopause.
Before we move on, have you heard of the term moon drivers?
No.
Okay, so this is a West African thing where in a lot of different cultures, when women enter menopause, you go through a new ceremony and like a new ritual, and you become a ceremony. Right? And you become an official moon driver. So women who are in the reproductive era are responsive to the moon. They are in a cycle where they are building up, but then letting go, building up, and then letting go, building up, and then letting go, in response to their cycle. They're living in response. They're living in a world that is driven by their cycle, that obviously maps onto the lunar cycle. And then postmenopausal women become moon drivers. So they are not living in response. They are pushing forward. Oof. And so instead of being driven by the moon, you are driving towards whatever you want, and you have a closed loop of energy. Oof. And so instead of letting your energy go every month and giving it out, right, either to children or to whatever, it's like it's a closed loop. And so you are now the full completion of the moon. And you are now a moon driver.
Goosebumps. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, so welcome. Awesome. You are now a moon driver.
Is there a party I need to throw for myself?
Yeah.
Totally.
Sounds
How do we
like
turn this into
totally. You got to turn this into a thing.
A social thing.
Yes. Well, and it was very common. It's one of those classic stories. Like, there's so many like rites and rituals and the markings of time that we've given up for the sake of modernity. And this is one of them.
All of our cultures, including, the one, my family's from India, like, we're very shameful. Like, don't talk about your period.
Yeah.
If you have your period, you're isolated.
Yeah.
It's not
it's still a modern convention in many places.
I'm gonna immediately research this and then invite you guys to my moon driver party.
I'm coming. Yeah.
Or something. We have to do something. Light some incense, have a party. Have a signature cocktail.
Yeah. And in many communities, many tribes like this, you then would be eligible to be an official elder.
Okay.
Like, you then step into
I love it.
Into like the leadership, because you are driving the narrative you are driving the agenda, as opposed to living in response to what's happening around you.
So I was recently at a convening with a lot of other progressive leaders, and they had me on a panel with somebody from Gen Z. And she referred to me casually as an elder.
Yeah.
And I was like, am I the elder?
Yeah.
And everyone in the room who was Gen X was like, are we the elders?
Yeah.
So I think it's
real tough.
It's funny, but it's also true, because we are the elders. I mean, I'm not assuming you're both Gen X. I think you might be millennials.
No, I'm a
elder
millennial.
millennials. I don't want to date
I'm a millennial.
I'm like square. When does millennial start? 82? We're like squarely middle-aged millennial. Oh, no, you're an elder millennial.
I am considered a elder millennial. Yeah.
I'm a middle-aged millennial.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we are Gen X. We are now the elders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I think, all joking aside, it was actually a powerful realization for me that there's something really exciting about being in that role.
Yeah.
Because we're beginning to your point about moon driving, we're Gen X, me and my career and my life, I am now feeling like I am, for the first time, as the principal of my organization, you know, as a leader, I'm able to reshape what leadership looks like in line with my own ethics, right? And my worldview as a woman of color, as an immigrant, first generation immigrant, a person who grew up in an incredibly conservative place like Texas. I feel like the most exciting part of being at this stage of life, I just told you all the tough parts. You know, when you asked me how I was doing, I had to give you the whole spiel of all the things that are so hard.
Which I appreciate, though. People need to hear it.
People need to know the reality. It's not glamorous. But the flip side of it is I'm in charge.
Yes.
Right?
I'm the boss.
100%.
And I can reframe what that looks like and bring along other folks into a journey that is much more equitable and transparent.
That's so,
which we did not have.
No. It's so crazy to like step into that era and then to be like, oh, right, now I'm in charge. The people at the beginning of my career who I looked up to and assumed had all the answers, like I am them now.
Yeah.
And even as I step back towards DC and back towards like genuine political work that I've been away from for almost a decade, it's sort of like, I am doing so unencumbered by so much of what the early years of my career were. It's like, I actually do know the answer. I actually know what the answer is. It's not the only answer, but like the answer for my area of expertise, I actually do know what it is. I've been working at this for 20 years. Like I'm not
You're the expert.
Certain.
Yes.
Yeah. Right?
You can't like look around.
No.
It's
and
you.
that is both incredibly exciting and you feel incredibly powerful in that. And you're also just like, right, I now feel a different level of responsibility.
It's pressure. You do feel
that
pressure.
I thought there would be someone, there likely would have been someone to come and save me at 25.
Yeah.
And like, that ain't happening now.
Politics is also a weird industry where I continually found myself, because I used to work in law and then finance, and then I got parachuted into this political world with a former career and a former life.
Yeah.
And thrown into these rooms, and my perception of politics was West Wing, which was
all you knew,
Aaron Sorkin's scripts, which was like every person in these rooms was the smartest person in the world.
And only one person of color.
Right,
of color, exactly. That too. But then you go into these rooms, and it's really unimpressive. Not to be mean. Like I would go into these
now
rooms.
You're really
I'm being kind of mean, but I would go into these rooms and I'd be like, oh, actually, the image in my head of the people running.
Yeah.
And by the way, my former boss, Barack Obama, says this all the time as well. Like he actually gave an interview where he said this, where in your head, you think that the people who are in charge know what they're doing.
Know everything, yeah.
And at that age, and I was a little bit older than most of my colleagues, they were children. I was in my 30s. I had Sadie, I had Oscar. Like I was an adult.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, like a lot of these people in these rooms, they actually don't know what they're doing. So to your point, I think that, and also to your point, which is like, no one's coming here to save us. Like this new generation, so excited about your moment.
Yeah.
Because I know that you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? I know that Carrie knows what she's doing, and there needs to be that passing of the baton. Like that needs to start happening in this town.
I think the space between, I think what Minnie just said earlier is also really important, is that we do this thing, and you see it with Elon Musk as like the most egregious example, where it's like because he's really good at one thing, we allow the assumption to be perpetuated that he's good at everything. Yeah. Right. And I think that we worked with a lot of people who were very, very good in their lane.
Yes.
But they start to fall apart at the fringes, right? And like maybe they had 2 lanes or 3 lanes that they were really good at, but they're all just people. Everyone's just people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm really good at another thing. I sent Minnie the wrong location for today. Minnie was 30 minutes, like we're 30 minutes late because I can't do like basic logistics.
You should know your strengths.
I do, right? And when I'm forced to operate outside of them, all hell breaks loose. No. And it's sort of like what Minnie was saying. It's just like, listen, there are areas in which she's thriving.
Yeah.
And then there's areas which, but for the support of
100%.
So many people, you'd be a disaster. Like we all, and that's true for all of us, I think. And I think that's as much the thing that comes to, or the thing that's obscured from young people, is that
you can't do it all by yourself.
You cannot do
really
it all.
can't.
Not at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think demonstrating the type of leadership that allows for that kind of honesty is incredibly important if we're going to convince young people to take their place in the movement.
Well, and then, in the alternative, we also have to convince leaders, boards of directors, donors, that if you want great talent to stay in our movement or to come to our movement, you've got to find ways to compensate folks.
Absolutely.
Because it is really, we cannot make our Gen X is very much like the martyr generation. I'm going to do this job for nothing because it's more important that the job get done and it's not about me. I was exactly like that until about 10 years ago when we got married and I started trying to plan my family.
Yeah.
And like you, I was in my 40s already when I was working for Hillary Clinton's presidential.
Yeah.
All of my bosses were younger than me.
Right. Politics is a very young person's game.
And I was like, oh gosh, I had some of the same experiences that you had, some of the same realizations, but I was old enough that I'd saved.
Yeah.
I could take a pay cut.
Yeah.
I'd done some different types of work. I could take the pay cut and then I could figure it out. And I quickly figured out, if I want to be really great at this, I have to have infrastructure around me. So because I was older, I was able to put it together faster.
Yeah, sure.
So when young people ask me for advice in their careers, I'm like, think about going corporate for a while.
It's a long haul.
Go make more money.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Do you have an investment strategy? I thought that was a silly question when I was only making, $60,000 a year, but you should actually have one.
Yeah.
Because what you invest now will matter later. All these things. And then going back to the qualifications of folks, one pushback I'll have, because I also was older when I got to the Hill. I was older when I left local politics in Texas and came to national politics. I was already in my 30s. I went to the corporate sector after Secretary Clinton lost, and I have a ton of respect for my colleagues in corporate. But what you just said about the White House is even more so in corporate. You know
Good
this.
point.
Oh
my God, I was shocked.
True.
The core people I worked with were super talented, like SVPs and up. That's why they made it to that level.
Very true.
But man, the amount of phoning it in, at least in the public sector. Like when I came back from corporate and I was in the Biden admin for about 9 months before I took this job. And it was after Trump, right? Yeah. And we were all patriotically digging ourselves out of a ditch, effectively.
Yeah.
The people I worked with were smarter, more capable, more passionate than anyone I really worked with in corporate America.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They cared deeply, and they were like, I'm going to give up these high-powered... everybody was there rolling up their sleeves going, you know what? I have a patriotic duty to fix this.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I also worked... The only corporate job I ever had, other than working for a boutique law firm, which I guess sort of counts, was I worked at JP Morgan on the trading desk. And here's the thing about JP Morgan at the time. That is
a different kind of job.
It's a very different kind of job, which is to say the people working there treat it like they are trying to make the NBA, meaing their whole life is their job.
Because they get rich.
Exactly. The incentives are so torqued, and also the competitive nature of working on a trading desk, which is if you don't actually produce, you're out.
Yeah.
So it creates this kind of really rough environment, which being a sports guy, I kind of liked. I kind of liked as a young man living in New York. It was kind of cool to be in that environment. So that was my only exposure to corporate world, which is actually a toxic version of what we're describing.
Yeah, forget HR.
Yeah, forget HR. That is pretty much cutthroat. I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to work my ass off all the time. My whole life is going to be my job. And I'm not saying that that's the way it should be, but anyway, we got
a good parallel to that is campaign life. I'll just say that.
100%.
Totally.
Also dysfunctional, also a little bit toxic.
Except you don't get paid in a campaign.
You don't get paid, but it's that thrill of the win.
Yeah. And if you do it in earnest, I will say, it would take a lot to get me to truly work on a campaign again for a year or something. I'm happy to parachute in at the end and feel
what
important.
You did.
Yeah, exactly what I did.
Well, and it's necessary. It's necessary for people to parachute in and out.
Absolutely. But I will say, I try and tell young people, if they're all interested in politics, to try and at least do one campaign.
Agreed.
Because the compressed timeline means that you have an opportunity, like, to work at that pace and that scale. It gives you an opportunity to really refine your gut instinct for things. It gives you an opportunity to like really be able to prioritize and triage your labor. So many people in corporate environments or other environments I've been in, like, they don't know how to accurately calibrate, like, this actually truly must happen right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is not significant or important or additive to the broader mission. And when you compress a time frame, it gives you an opportunity to really instinctively develop that kind of clarity.
Agreed. Yeah.
And it's really hard to get that anywhere else. And it has served me so well in every other environment I've been in. And it's just, you can't kind of intellectually get yourself, you really have to be pressurized in that way to learn that.
I also tell anyone who wants to work in government that you have to work on a campaign.
Yeah.
You do not understand the motivations for members of Congress or elected officials. You don't understand what moves them, the pressures they're under.
Such
you don't
a great
understand like what issues rise to the top.
Yes.
And, you know, the push and pull. If you want to lobby and you haven't worked on a campaign,
you don't get it.
You don't get it at all.
Yes.
And if you want to build grassroots campaigns on issues like we do at my org, you would never be able to do it if you didn't work on a campaign. And I think that's the piece of, you know, you made the very lovely comment about my reputation and being trusted in this town. And I like to think, and I'm sure there's somebody who dislikes me, and we're just going to, now we're going to find them.
It's not true.
Yeah, there's got to be. There's everyone who's doing kind of things.
Oh, yeah.
Minnie is doing has a hater.
Carrie and I had the last time we talked, we had a convo about people that we all pretend to like, but we might kind of be
God, yeah.
Yeah. Just
deeply
terrible.
sus.
Yeah.
We'll put their names in the comment section.
In the show notes.
But I do think that the trust I've engendered, to the extent that what you said is accurate, is because I've worked all the jobs.
Yes, agreed.
All the jobs. Like, you know, our version of like bottle washer, you know, dishwasher. I've been a canvasser. I started my career as a canvasser for CalPERG in California.
Man, I love CalPERG.
Yeah.
In Berkeley, like knocking on the doors, talking about clean water.
Yeah.
To like, you know, being like a grassroots lobbyist, to being, I did call time. I was a call time manager. Like, if there's a job in politics, I've done it.
Yeah.
And I do think that gives me a little bit of, okay, I understand where you're coming from when I'm talking to somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm understanding what's going to motivate you to talk to me.
Right. Can we talk about how you decided to take this job?
Yeah.
Because I have to imagine that you really pros and cons that one.
It is a crazy job.
I was so excited to hear when you got it, though.
So was I.
Very exciting.
You're so nice.
And it's a real thing to take on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say. In many ways, this was my dream job. I used to work for, it's impossible to say the late, but it is the late Cecile Richards. She was, and is like my forever boss and role model. Yeah. So, I mean, having a job like this, the blueprint was in my mind, but it never seemed like that's a job for people who are incredible, like a Cecile, right? Not for me. So, if you had asked me even a year prior to taking this job, if this was the type of job I wanted, now I'm like, okay, I better not. I got to talk into the mic.
Yeah, talking to the mic.
Hot tip to our friend Tom Binder. I need to talk into the mic. You know, I didn't think this was what I didn't think I wanted to be a principal. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome and doubts before I did it. But I left corporate America when Biden won. Our good friend Gautam Raghavan called me and was like the best human. Was like, hey, you know, you've been in corporate for a while. That's great. Don't you want to come help serve your country? And I'm like,
don't you want to do something with some meaning?
And, you know, I'd done DEI in corporate America, and there was this role working with OPM overseeing a government-wide rehaul of DEI. And I was like, that's a cool job. I want to go do that. And then I met all the people at OPM, and I was like, these people are stars.
Yeah.
This is such an exciting group of people. And I was perfectly happy. I was like, I'm going to do this job. This is funny. I'm going to do this. There's somebody up there looking out for me, making sure I don't make crazy mistakes, because this has happened a few times in my life where I was like, okay, I'm going to do that for a year, and then I'm going to go back into corporate and do DEI.
Yeah.
If I had done that, I would be probably spectacularly laid off by now.
Yeah.
anyway, I did that job for about 6 months when I got a phone call from a friend who was recruiting for this job at formerly NARAL, saying, Elise Hogue is leaving. And I was like, oh, that's not the job for me. I just got to the Biden administration. I'm doing this very cool job. I love it so much. And then a couple of months later, I'm getting the timeline a little bit off by a few months, but shortly after that, the Supreme Court decided to grant cert for the Dobbs litigation.
Oh, yeah.
And
Talk
that
about
was the
timing.
moment
Will you just
all
break
knew.
down what
Yes.
that means?
So here's
real
what
quick?
that means. So since Roe v. Wade became law of the land in 1973, there have been ongoing litigation state by state about the constitutionality, just questioning the boundaries of what Roe could do, right? And we've seen multiple Supreme Court decisions, the most well-known one being Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which have dramatically reduced the power of Roe v. Wade. So continually reinterpreting the constitutional right to abortion, narrowing it. And that's been the 50-year game. And we're going to talk about Dobbs. This is a good transition. Like, that's the 50-plus year game to undo how we got to the overturning of Roe. The Dobbs the Dobbs case was coming out of Mississippi, and it was about the 15-week abortion ban in the state. There was only one clinic left in Mississippi. So, look, we knew the minute that Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump in 2016 that the extreme right would find a way to take an abortion case to the Supreme Court once Donald Trump was able to ram through his Supreme Court justices. And we warned it. I mean, Hillary warned about it. So you
did too. I remember having a conversation with you saying, like,
this is going to happen.
It's going to happen.
And they're like, no, it's not going to happen. It's the law of the land. It's settled law. We're like, no,
it is not.
This is the playbook. If you've been paying attention, this is the playbook. So basically 3 more justices, famously the last one being Amy Coney Barrett. Every single one of those justices testifying to the Senate that they would respect Roe v. Wade as precedent, which means they would respect it as the law. So that's the frame. That's the place that we were at when the Supreme Court decided to hear the Dobbs case out of Mississippi. They'd stacked the court. They had an extremist supermajority. So once they took that case, we're like, oh, well, this is it. They're going to overturn Roe.
Yeah.
You still had pundits and folks in the mainstream press saying, no, John Roberts isn't that crazy. That would be so unpopular. That would have seismic repercussions on the country. That's unbelievable. But we were all prepared as a movement.
Yeah.
So I'm in the Biden administration for a couple of months. Elise decides to step down. They start recruiting. I was like, no, I don't want to leave. A few months later, the court decides to take up the Dobbs decision, which is what grant cert means. And I went to my husband and I was like, oh, they're gonna overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
And he was like, you think? And I'm like, yeah. And, walked him through it. He was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm going to call that recruiter back.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a different job.
Yeah.
Than it was just a few months ago. And he was like, okay, well, let's talk about, the scenarios. And I was like, he said to me, you will be so mad if they overturn Roe and you are either in the government and you can't say anything. Right? Because you know how it is. You were both in the Obama administration. You can't comment.
Not allowed to say a thing.
It's like, you're going to want to go.
Yeah.
You're going to want to go guns blazing.
Yeah.
No pun. I mean, not the
kids
right
call it
terminology.
Fireable offense.
You're going to want to go
ham.
And you're not even going to be able to talk about it.
No. Fireable offense for your name to show up in the newspaper.
And you don't want to go back to corporate with this happening.
No.
So you do need to seriously consider this opportunity. And so I interviewed, and I think between May and August, and I took the job by 2 weeks before the oral arguments of the Dobbs decision, which is crazy.
Unbelievable.
But, that was a very dramatic answer to your question, but it's important. I just didn't think I was the right person.
Yeah. Interesting.
And that it was the right thing for me. But I got so upset about the court. I was like, I think you said this earlier, no one else is coming to save us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not me? If not me, who?
To me, it's the true mark of adulthood. Is like when you quit looking around.
Like, oh my God, I'm the elder.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might be the person they need.
Agreed.
And they may not pick me, and that's okay. I don't have it. That was the other really nice part about it, is I was like, I have a really cool job. If they don't pick me, it means it wasn't for me.
Yes.
And there's this whole other thing I'm supposed to be doing.
Sex
and I'm going to right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was a little sexy to them that
It
I
is.
was like, I may not be the one.
Yeah. Sexy indifference. It really makes a big difference.
I should have known that when I was dating, but I didn't actually understand that.
Before the internet's fucked up sexy indifference as it relates to dating. But before we talk about the like Dobbs today, right? And the implications and where we are today,
anniversary
and what
next
organizing looks like today. By the time this is airing this week. But I would like to just like quickly talk about the mass delusion that Roe was not going to get overturned.
Oh my God.
Because I remember the same thing, and just being, and people's shock.
Well,
and
the
just
leak,
sort of
remember,
like,
it was like
and it was leaked.
It was leaked a month before.
The decision was leaked a month before. And even then people were like, no. And we see this happen across issue area where people on the left, whether it's journalists, and journalism, people on the left, separating those two things. The Republicans, for better or worse, do a very good job of telling us exactly what they're going to do by posting it on the internet, right? And like being very public about what they're doing, why they're doing, to what ends.
Project 2025.
Like literally on a website. Like whether it's ALEC, whether it's all of these things we've seen over the course of the 50-year campaign to like turn America into like a Christian nationalist nation, they tell us in explicit terms what they're going to do, and yet we persist in not believing them. And I don't know, what is that about us as a really the broadest use of the word left. Like we've seen it on immigration, we've seen it on Roe, we've seen it over and over. What's going on? Why is this happening?
Yeah, on immigration too. Like I was just reminding somebody, remember the night at the convention where they all held up signs saying mass deportation now? It wasn't even buried in a document on the internet. It was literally a whole night of hate.
And Minnie, but here's the thing, not to be one of these people, did we talk about immigration one time at the Democratic National Convention?
We're still afraid of it. We're still afraid of it.
Yeah, so we're
still afraid of it.
I agree with Carrie. I think that
what about,
I think you said mass delusion, and I love that, and I want to dig into that. So a couple of things. We're actually in the middle, and I'm happy to like get you all of this when we're done. We're in the middle of a big research project trying to figure out what the hell happened on abortion, where we had in states like Arizona where we won the ballot measure. Ruben Gallego won resoundingly and talked about abortion all the time.
Yeah.
But we were not able to persuade people about Kamala Harris.
Right.
And on the issue of abortion. And it's that the other side, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of, we don't love on our side to confront hard truths. We are in some ways a little too forgiving. We are very open to seeing the middle ground, which is actually a good quality, but we get a little bit too optimistic about how much we can move folks from the center to our side, which is why I think we keep spending to the middle, right? Spending to the independent. We need to do all of the above. Like we can't just do one thing or another. And we tend to over-index on talking to the moderate middle of the country.
Agreed.
But the other piece of it is the other side is just really damn good at lying.
Yeah.
That is a very good point.
Donald Trump spent tons of time and money on that campaign saying, I'm not going to touch abortion.
Yep.
I'm going to leave it to the states. I have no interest in this. And it was very persuasive. So we could say Project 2025, here's all the shit he did. He's responsible for overturning Roe. We could play the clip where he bragged about how he did it. People
he didn't run on it though.
He didn't. Not only did he not run on it, he responded.
Yes.
This goes to your point.
Yes.
Did our side respond to immigration? No, we kept quiet. Did we respond to the anti-trans attacks?
Nope.
No, but he responded.
Yeah.
He had a whole campaign that was like, I'm not going to do anything about that.
Yeah.
And it was persuasive enough that as we're going back into these battleground states and we're doing these focus groups, we're finding more and more folks who said, well, Sure, yeah, but he said he wasn't going to do it. And then our facilitator will give them the list of the stuff that he did. And the folks in those focus groups will get very angry, viscerally. So like, what? He lied to me. And what that tells me is a couple of things. They're with us on the issue, but they don't believe us. We've always had, and this is the problem with Dobbs too, we had a massive believability gap. People just did not believe the court would overturn Roe. We called it the believability gap. I did like a month of press before the decision saying, we have a believability gap, but this is what's going to happen. You know, and that's exactly what happened in the election. They're more believable than us. People look at Donald Trump and they're like, oh, he's a straight shooter.
Yeah, I know.
He tells the truth. And I don't know about that Kamala Harris. She's a little, you know, she's
Neely.
talking out of both sides of her mouth, even if she wasn't. You know, there's that perception. But he's a straight shooter and he's going to tell me the truth. And also, I don't think he cares about abortion.
Yeah.
This isn't important to him, but it's sure important to you. But it's not that important to him. He's not going to do it.
Yeah.
So now we are going back, and it's actually hard, but it works. We've got to go back and show, not tell, show this is what they did. And the one good piece of this research that's come out, because we can't do a ton about Trump right now, is that, I mean, there's things we can do, but we can't unelect him, right?
Right.
But we have a midterm coming up. And what we learned is they believe Trump, but they don't believe the members of Congress.
Yeah.
So that's the window for us. That's an opportunity for us to go back to them and say, this Congress, these congressional Republicans are rubber stamping this stuff that Donald Trump said he wasn't going to do. Who are you going to punish? You're mad.
Yeah.
Who are you going to punish? It's a window for us. And we've got to take advantage of it, and we've got to be aggressive.
Yes.
And we have to be very clear. And we can't have a part of our party, bless them, saying, oh, you're being too hysterical. Or you're being too alarmist, which our movement has been facing like since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Hysterical females. I'm not going to say anybody in the current party ecosystem has called us hysterical or me hysterical lately.
Yeah.
Since Dobbs.
Not publicly.
Since Dobbs. But there's still a whole voice out there right now, a whole movement of folks saying we talked about abortion a little too much. And
I still remember those conversations.
They're still
happening right now.
Yeah.
They're still happening.
They're still happening.
Oh, yeah.
Right now.
That wild conference that was here a couple weeks ago. That
the third way thing?
Come on.
God bless them.
I mean, there was a whole manifesto put out.
God bless those guys.
Saying, hey, we spent too much time on social issues, including abortion. Like, abortion is not a social issue. It's a fundamental bodily autonomy, fundamental freedom, economic. It transcends gender identity, which is why we also have to broaden the message. As long as it's just about women and what choices they make when they're in a crisis or when they're not in a crisis and how they manage their pregnancy, it will not transcend.
So what are you doing? What is Reproductive Freedom for All doing to help it transcend?
Yeah, so the messaging was a big part of it, but it's also about making sure we're talking to everybody. And the good news about the message, the Reproductive Freedom Frame, which is what we call it, the Freedom Framework, is it resonates with Trump supporters. It resonates with, rural white guys. It resonates with, Gen Z women of color in Detroit. It doesn't mean we're speaking out of both sides of our mouth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about the same issue in different ways to different audiences, although that is necessary sometimes. I'm not criticizing that. But the power of the framework is we can talk about it to everybody in the same way.
Yeah.
And everybody understands it. They don't have to agree about the act of abortion, but they can understand the lack of interest in politicians making these decisions for them.
Yeah.
And that's the transcendent thing. And then you have to organize around it. So for us, that means going to college campuses. It means, going to community college campuses. So we actually started doubling down on community college campuses because it means we're talking to kids who are living in their own community and are the best organizers for their grandparents, and their friends. It means doubling down on organizing overall, including digital organizing, where we realized we did an analysis of our membership, and it will not surprise anybody.
It's very old.
It was like 90%. My team's gonna get mad at me because this number's probably not exactly right. Like white women over 50.
Sure.
I remember this, yeah.
And here's the thing I'm gonna say about white women over 50. They are ride or die on this issue. They are the muscle They are the muscle. They vote, they volunteer, and they donate.
Yep.
So I'm not here for any maligning of white women. And I'm not just for my job. I'm not. I mean, I think white women, as much as they've been a challenge for us in the ballot box, are also the heart of the movement. That being said, we don't win with only white women because we still can't get all the white women.
Yeah.
So we've got to expand to other populations. So for us, it's, being online, being digital, just wasn't something we were doing before. So we're a little bit late to the party, but we've caught up really fast.
Well, it's not just you.
It's the whole ecosystem.
I was just going to say, I think that you guys have done an incredible job. I'm not just saying that because Minnie did hire me to make a video for them, and it was very well received. It was beautiful
video.
Got
Liza
Koshy in the mix.
Oh, I
it was
love
beautiful.
Liza.
Yeah, we got to get her back.
The piece that's exciting for me, though, speaking of the base, like that is the engine right now of the Democratic Party are young women.
We have to.
They are young women.
Yes.
And if you look at the concentration of enthusiasm in this last election, it was young women.
Yeah.
Young white women as well.
Yeah.
Not just young women of color.
Yeah. Well, they have the most to lose.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. 100%.
And they've already lost it.
Yes.
Like this is the first generation of young people coming to, hitting puberty.
Yep.
In the beginning of their reproductive journey without the same rights that we had.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy.
And they're radicalized by it. So if we're not harnessing that, we're making a massive mistake. So there's a lot of discussion about what's happening with men. I think it's really important. Can talk about that, can talk to other people about that. But the fundamental core of our movement has to be these young women and these young women of color.
It's also a false choice. I'm
100% a false
I'm tired of hearing, I love men. They're great. Love young men. They're awesome. But the number
I'm married to one, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I am one, I guess. But the number of conversations I have with people in this town, and that's all people want to talk about right now, are young men. And I'm like, bro, I mean, first off, young men don't vote nearly as much as young women. Young men also, there are a lot of mechanisms and communities that already exist that we can be tapping into reaching young men.
Young women talk to young men too.
Exactly.
Young men are really interested in what young
women
think.
And young women actually, exactly. Young men like young women.
Yeah.
I think that there is, and I feel like that whatever third way conference probably talked a lot about young men, but I think the Democratic Party needs to double down on young women. And I think that the work that you're doing right now, it's not, let's really support the people who are there for us right now. We're really good. The Democratic Party is really good. And Randy Weingarten just dropped out of the DNC this morning. Lee fucking Saunders just dropped out of the DNC this morning.
I missed that.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here, team? How are we not supporting our people?
We also I have so much respect to
be clear, they did not drop out of the party. They resigned from their DNC seats. Their seats on the DNC executive committee.
For what purpose, though, Carrie Twain? Not to be controversial.
That is a different conversation.
So here's what I'll say. I have so much respect for the folks you just named.
Yeah.
But isn't part of the fight we're having about how we're creating more space for younger voices in the DNC?
Sure. Is that maybe that's a fight? Okay.
I mean, I don't know if it's a fight.
Sure.
But isn't one of the discussions we're having, the David Hogg, situation about how do we create more pathways for younger folks?
It is, but I think we don't need to go down this path. But I think that
tricky
from
path.
My perspective is
it's fresh.
The one
fresh.
piece.
We don't even have the analysis.
We don't even have the analysis. Yeah. But the one piece of the Democratic Party in this sort of reckoning is that we've sucked with labor. Speaking of not being able to reach men.
Yeah.
Sucked with labor,
Listen,
number one.
I love this drum.
Right?
I love to beat this drum.
And number two, Randy actually supported David. So, yes, that's the other part. Yeah. She was actually supportive of getting more young people involved. I just feel...
But there's not just one way. Here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Without knowing all the facts and, another conversation for another day. Maybe over a cocktail.
We like to be spicy here at Twig and Jenkins.
Maybe here over a cocktail.
Yeah.
But this is why I still have friends in this town.
Exactly.
There you go.
Whereas Twig and I do not. Let's be real.
Here's what
less popular by the day.
There's more than one way to recruit and engage young people. I think David Hogg is doing something really remarkable.
Yeah.
I also think that may not be compatible with
Sure.
the DNC's goals, right? I think labor leaders like Randy and Lee are so critical,
Yes.
but we also need to create pathways for folks who do not sit in those big, powerful positions
Sure.
to have influence. So I think, it's new. We're in a new moment. It doesn't shock me that all of our DC insiders are all doing their best and trying to figure out what the path forward is. And what I would say is, we need 1,000 different options. We need to test and experiment.
I completely agree.
We need,
that, I
we
think,
need
is
our
the big
funder friends
thing.
and our resourced friends to say, I'm going to try lots of different strategies. And it's not all
I
going to be
agree.
the DNC.
I
Totally.
completely agree.
And I think the hard truth that sits at the heart of the moment that we're in, that I don't think Democrats are very good at speaking plainly or just the left broadly, is that we're losing across the board. We're losing on every issue, and we're losing with every group of there is progress to be made on every issue and with every demographic.
Yes.
And so it doesn't actually, like the false choice that you're
Yes,
talking
agreed.
about. We need more young women. Yes, they are an engine. Yes, they are stalwarts. We need more of them.
Yep.
Yes, we obviously need we need more of everybody.
Yep.
Well,
In order to get ourselves to better win numbers, we need more of everybody.
And we need investment in entities that are not just partisan.
Yeah.
So again, being selfish, I'll say funding orgs like us, we speak to voters who will never talk to the DNC.
Right.
Of course.
We speak to activists who just have no interest in partisan politics, but they are interested in advocating for their fundamental rights.
Yeah.
So we have to be willing to fund and resource orgs and leaders who are going to do things outside of the DNC. So I think fund David Hogg's org to do what they're doing.
Yep.
But don't do that. Don't primary Democrats through the DNC.
Yeah.
Sure.
I
But don't be
totally
surprised when people at the DNC have a problem with it.
That's right.
Okay, so it's Dobbs week.
Yes.
What's happening? How can people get involved?
Yeah.
If
As
I'm
this
just
is
like
airing, this is the third year anniversary. Wow, it took me a second. I'm like,
I know. I
God.
wrote in
It's
this
already been
document.
3 years.
Yeah.
years. It's shocking. So here's the state of play. We have 21 states in this country with abortion bans or extreme restrictions. So that means we're basically living in a segregated society. Professor Michelle Goodwin, who's a genius, calls it Jane Crow or somebody. Yeah, I think she calls it Jane Crow. Maybe it was somebody else who calls it that, but I'll fact check myself. But we are living in a moment where, depending on your zip code and your geography, you may not have the same freedoms as somebody else, which is shocking for any student of American history. We are seeing higher rates of maternal mortality. We're seeing very high-profile problematic cases of criminalization. We are seeing interstate conflicts where we have, a doctor in New York being prosecuted by the Attorney General of Texas, where we're seeing more and more states having to come up with creative solutions to protect patients who are coming from states with bans into states where they have access. We are living literally in a state where I'm in an access state and my family and friends in Texas are in a ban state. And that is the new way of thinking about life as a person with a uterus in this country.
Doctors aren't even living in certain states. They're not going to practice
it's exacerbating healthcare deserts in places where we already knew there weren't enough providers.
Yeah.
Because why do I want to live in a state where there could be a bounty on my head, Texas, if I even say the word abortion to my cancer patient who's pregnant? Right? And the relevance of that is if you are pregnant and you have cancer, you have to choose.
Yeah.
Am I going to get chemo or am I going to have an abortion?
It's unbelievable.
Right? Am I going to stay pregnant or not? And it could be about your life, but I've talked to oncologists in banned states who said, I don't even feel comfortable giving my patient medically accurate information, so I'm going to have to leave this state because I'll be committing malpractice. So we're in this crisis of care, but also crisis of just fundamental freedom the freedom to leave the state, the freedom to have your medical information protected. Do you want to use a period tracking app and have the state track what your state of pregnancy is to get accurate information online? So we are 3 years in. Every year that goes by, every month that goes by, every day that goes by, the horror stories multiply. So this week that this episode is airing, we've got over 100 abortion storytellers on the Capitol right now, talking to members of Congress. These are, when I say abortion storytellers, these are folks who've had an abortion and have their reasons, their very personal, intimate reasons for having them. And they are now bravely going forward and telling those stories to the public, to anyone who will listen, to the members of Congress, to make sure folks understand the ramifications of these bans, the broad range of ramifications. And storytelling is one of the most powerful ways for us to persuade people that we need as few limitations as possible on abortion care. We also have over 100 Reproductive Freedom for All members in town. We are a membership organization. We have 4 million members across the United States, and 100 plus of our most active members are here for organizing training. So they're going to do boot camp on digital organizing, grassroots organizing, lobbying, and then they're going to go to the Hill, and they're also going to talk to members of Congress. So this is the fun stuff.
Yeah.
This is the stuff I really love, like really training citizen activists and being the leaders of the movement. But if you can't come to DC and you can't get involved, we have a digital organizing program for that reason. And we really love for people to join us and be part of our movement.
How do they access it?
I had a cheat sheet right
here. Look at that.
I should have it memorized.
Look at that.
You can text REPRO, REPRO.
We'll put it at the bottom of the screen.
59791. Is that right, Anna?
Say that again.
REPRO to 59791. And you will be contacted by our text team. And we have a really fun text bank team. They are doing almost weekly actions. I think this week it's with the drag queen activist Tara Hoot, who is amazing. She's amazing. She's one of the ones who went to the Kennedy Center and did that action.
Yeah, she did.
She's incredible. So she's leading a text bank this week for Pride, or last week. And we do lots of fun text banks with special guests, so we can get folks engaged. You can get it together. You can contact voters.
And so for folks who may be tuning in not knowing, like what are the actions? The actions are accountability to members of Congress. The actions are state and local. What are the actions?
So right now, for example, the big fight is on budget reconciliation, which is a fancy way of saying Congress has to pass a budget.
Yep.
Republicans are trying to stick a lot of nasty shit in this budget, including defunding Planned Parenthood, including gutting Medicaid. Medicaid is responsible for more births, prenatal and postpartum care in this country. In some states, it's the majority of all reproductive care, not just abortion, because abortion is not paid by the federal government. So not abortion at all, but everything else. And if we want to be a country that wants to ban abortion, how are we going to then cut prenatal, birth, and postpartum care? It's insanity.
It's insane.
It's insanity. So that's what's being debated right now in Congress. So around the time of the Dobbs anniversary is also the time the Senate is really digging into the budget. So it's a great opportunity for us to connect the dots between reproductive freedom, reproductive health care, and the budget. So if you texted that number right now, very likely you would get plugged into an activation targeting members of Congress who we think we can persuade on this issue, letting them know we're not going to tolerate, we're not going to stand for these attacks on reproductive care. Our organization has a C3, a 501c3 status, a C4, and a PAC. So we do things across those entities. It means we can just do citizen lobbying on an issue or voter education, but it also means we can be more explicit and say, member of Congress so-and-so, we will vote you out if you do this. So that gives us a little bit of a muscle that some other orgs don't have. So if you join us, you'll get to do all of the things.
We love that. So depending on where you are on the get in their face scale.
Yes.
So
you can pick your way of getting in the face. And if you just want to share information, we have lots of fun ways to just share this meme, share this infographic. Because again, going back to the focus groups, people don't know what's going on. And it's by design. The Trump administration knows how deeply unpopular this is. That's why he lied during the election. So a big job is just letting your friends and family, the people on your social feed, know when Donald Trump and his admin are doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if your tolerance level is, I just want to share crazy stuff, that is still activation. That is still organizing.
It's such a great Minnie. I think that alone, if anything, for people to like glob onto, for my parents that watch Fox News, right?
Yes.
It's just such an art of distraction.
Yes.
Right?
Military parade while we're gutting your 100%.
Exactly. Because they know it doesn't poll well. Because they know that the American people are on our side on this issue. So what do? They just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this other shit.
Well, they try and direct everyone's attention to something else.
Exactly.
Because they're talking about it on the Hill. They're just hoping that they can just create a little spectacle over here.
That's right.
To make sure you don't hear them or 100%. You don't listen.
We have protests around immigration in LA, so we're going to do a military parade.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. And as you said, they do it very well, right? Like Donald Trump, there's
good at it.
So much evidence. You're showing people in focus groups, but here's what they've done, and not just this term, but the previous terms. And then he runs a campaign, lays out a whole different story that directly contradicts everything that they've already done.
But I do think you raised a really important point. I'm going to ask our research team to dig into this. I can't get it out of my head. You said mass delusion. And I think about, what Heather Cox Richardson and Ruth Ben-Ghiat and a lot of these scholars of authoritarianism talk about, right? And how you think about Hitler, you think about Bolsonaro, you think about so many of these, Putin, who've been able to really brainwash their countries. And, we all have family members who, for better or for worse, have fallen into the MAGA cult. Yeah. Right? They believe it. So the mass delusion is less on our side, but our side our side's too polite.
Yeah.
The other,
it's a failure of imagination that it can be bad. Like it's just over and over and over again. There is a failure of imagination on behalf of the left that the thing that they tell us they're going to do,
they will actually
in real time. Do.
But we also have a lot of well-intentioned people who really have fallen for the shtick.
It's both. For sure. It's a very good point.
And we have to address it. Yeah. And we have to sort of, what's the magic thing we have to say to snap these folks out of it?
Yeah.
Right. And is there a magical thing? And if not, okay, what are the less magical options that we can
And I think it's
undertake?
The unsexy stuff. I really do think it's the metaphorical or literal door knocking. You got to just talk to people.
You got to talk to people and listen to people is the other big thing. Yeah.
Yes. I had a very interesting conversation with somebody, who I work with on my health, who is an independent and just does not believe half the stuff that's happening. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I have to, instead of being really triggered by it, I have to ask her, well, why don't you believe it? Who are the messengers that you trust? And when we dug into it, none of the messengers she trusts are talking about our stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's something I know you, with your work at Culture House, really dig into. We also have to have different, I don't even think it's better. I think it's just different messengers.
I couldn't agree more.
We do.
The other part about it, what you're doing, to give you props, the storytelling piece, because people don't believe it or don't care about a thing. And a lot of it comes from privilege because it does not affect them. So they'll see something and they'll be like, oh, well, that sounds bad. Hasn't affected me yet.
I can't imagine it affecting
Can't imagine it will affect me. But then once it starts to affect you or your family member or a loved one, then, this is what happened with the Doge cuts. Being wildly unpopular. Because there are so many people in red states, so many people in deep red counties and districts that were, especially in New Jersey where I'm from, that are like, fuck this. This is not what I voted for.
Yeah.
So what we're going to find is that is going to start happening. But what you're doing is a lot of that happens, but there's not a megaphone. There's not an amplifying effect. There's not a culture house to then tell that story. We have to find communities, find people who are affected.
Yes.
And we have to let them tell their story.
Well, and we have to tell it over and over again. So this is the other part. The abortion storytellers who are going to be here and who we're partnering with a couple of other organizations that do this really smart work to fund content.
Yep.
we can't, it's not one and done.
Yeah.
We can't like run an ad during an election and be like, everyone's going to
Honestly.
remember that horrible thing that happened to the woman in Georgia whose daughter died. They won't remember. So we have to create more of a constant
every
day.
The
same 5 stories. It doesn't,
it doesn't matter.
We just don't repeat them enough.
It has to be every day.
And that goes back to, you're talking about abortion too much. We are not talking about abortion enough.
We should be talking about it every
all
single day.
The time.
Every single day.
Because we have such a clear advantage and it doesn't stick. The other thing I was going to say was, that's different than other issues. You don't think about whether you need an abortion until you need an abortion.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is one of those things where you may just never think you ever needed one.
Yeah.
You may have a very well planned pregnancy, and you may still think I could never need an abortion until you have a crisis. Half the storytellers will tell you, I wanted this baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had no intention of having. I thought abortion was a bad thing until I couldn't get one, and I almost died.
Yeah.
Now, that shouldn't be, some folks in the movement call it sort of the trauma story. Like, you should also be able to get an abortion just because you want to have an abortion.
Yes.
You don't want to be pregnant.
Yeah.
Right.
Those are the stories we also have to tell. But people don't think about this until they're in that situation.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of an extra challenge for us in terms of showing and not telling. People don't feel it until they feel it. The closest thing we can get is to show them the story of someone they can imagine either being or being connected to, who they love.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. We'll definitely want to clip. Do you already have some of these videos and stories?
Yeah, we have a ton.
So when we post this episode, we'll definitely include some of those clips and stories in here.
Before Cecile passed, she started an organization called Abortion in America, which is just documenting these stories. And Carrie came and spoke at the convening.
It's beautiful.
And it's really powerful stuff.
It really is. Before we wrap, we have in the audience today.
I know. Sadie Q, can you come on camera, bub? Do you want to come up?
She's wearing fabulous shoes.
She has the coolest Chuck Taylor platforms. And this is real.
Brad's eldest
my
child.
daughter, Sadie. Sadie, you can maybe sit here next to Minnie. But here's the thing, guys. Sadie Q, this is her first day on summer vacation. She had an end of year school project. Mm-hmm. Unbeknownst to me, it was about your organization, Minnie. So Sadie Q, do you have any questions for Minnie? Or do you have anything to say about everything that we were talking about?
Okay.
Yeah. I think another thing is we need to spread a lot of awareness about this too. Like, like what you said, we have to keep talking about it too.
We can't be afraid to talk about it.
Especially among like these like Gen like Z and Gen like Alpha, especially like this new generation. We've got to really talk about it and spread awareness about it.
Are you Gen Z or Gen Alpha?
I'm like the oldest Gen, like I'm a very old Gen Alpha.
You're like elder Gen Alpha. Like you're an elder.
First mover.
For my kids, because my kids are 6, so you're like their elder.
There you go. Everything's relative.
Right? Right? I know. Like I was like, am I an elder? You're an elder, Sadie. But I agree because Gen Alpha is going to be the first, Gen Z and Gen Alpha are the first generations that are not going to have this right at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how do we prepare them?
Got to really like spread awareness about this,
And you got to be the ones to lead it, to fix it.
Exactly, yeah.
And then we have to be the ones to prepare and give you the resources to do it.
Yeah.
We can't hold on to the power and the resources. Mm-hmm. We got to be ready to pass it on to you so you can fix it.
Exactly.
But we have to help you fix it because it's not fair that we created the problem and then you have to fix it. That's not cool. I know. It is the way it always happens.
Like the youth clean up the
I know.
mess.
And I know this is like a tough topic, right? A lot of young people don't want to probably talk about it.
But I feel like we really do need to talk about it a lot if we really want to get the message through and like change things like throughout people like in all generations, just like to really make an impact on this topic,
Well, I already have more hope.
Yeah.
With
Sadie's
Sadie and her generation, but specifically Sadie.
Sadie's fit too. I'm realizing you're like totally matching, Sadie.
I know, it's very cool.
Style and substance. That's what we like here at Twig and Jenkins.
Thank you for joining us, Sadie. And Minnie, we know how busy you are, so thank you so much.
This was the most fun part of my week.
So fun. So fun. We would love to have you back.
I would love to be back.
Thank you. And Twig, we're going to watch a game tonight.
We are.
We have
We
NBA
are.
Finals
I
game
know.
tonight.
Very exciting.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Minnie. Thank you, Sadie.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.